All right, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that the second limited character, second 5-star unit that's going to be coming in version 2.4 is finally here. And they've brought a lot of clues for what's going to actually be coming in that update. Some of the weapon types that they're going to be using, because of course, this is a pretty unique spear-looking halberd thing we got over here, and some references to some past releases that the game has had. I think it's pretty clear from what we're seeing over here what type of attribute this character is going to be and the kind of themes that they're going to have. They kind of remind me, in all honesty, they remind me of a fusion version of Jian, because they've got like their spear, they've clearly got like some sort of like fiery wolf going on over here, and we all know Jian has that similar sort of aesthetic, right, where he's got the spear that summons the green dragon. And yeah, that's going to be what I'm thinking just from the perspective of, you know, character design, the weapon that they're using. Now let's actually get into a little bit of their lore and maybe what I think they're going to be serving, what type of role they're going to be playing on some of their teams moving forward, because they hopefully should fill in a very needed gap on the roster that's, let's be honest here, that hasn't been filled in a really, really long time. So with that, let's start breaking down the post over here. Post lament, whatever. Just ignore the attention, warrior. This victory is ours to savor. And that's from Lupa. The Star Gladiator of Septimont, which is what I'm imagining is the newest region that either is related to Renacita or maybe is completely separate from Renacita. The Star Gladiator of Septimont, a warrior with pure heart, untamed spirit, intense passion, and immense potential. She will relentlessly pursue the things she admires, cherishing each moment that allows her to indulge in competition and self-expression on stage. And so, yeah, we can kind of tell she might be one of the most aggressive, the most battle-fueled characters that we have probably releasing in 2.0. I don't think we've had this sort of like aesthetic, this sort of vibe yet. And you can see she summons the wolves over here. They're probably going to play an essential part of her kit. And we even have like a teaser of what Septimont, that new region, is going to be looking like. And so right off the bat, what I wanted to talk about when it comes to Septimont is the fact that they have this in the background. If you're all familiar with how drip marketing, teasers, all of that stuff has worked in the past, you would know that this kind of represents, behind the name, what you're seeing over here, that represents almost like the sentinel of the region. And so what this means is that Septimont might actually be considered a completely separate expansion, much like how Renacita and Raguda were considered a separate expansion. Let's just go ahead and explore. We've got Cartithia's drip marketing over here. We can clearly see we've got the hippocampus, right? We've got all of like the Imperator fused with the Thronodian representing Raguda over here, and that's going to be behind Cartithia's name. And so it clearly means something that when it comes to Septimont and Lupa's release, we've got something entirely, completely separate over here. And I think Kuro did mention that there was going to be a big region expansion every 6 months. And so we can imagine that 2.4 might be one of the biggest patches, one of the biggest map expansions that we've had in a really, really, really long time. I mean, it hasn't been that long. 2.0 released in January, but it feels like it actually feels like it hasn't been that long since then. So yeah, I mean, this is looking like a bit of like a griffin. It looks like it's actually holding a weapon too. Who knows how related it is to Renacita as a whole, or how separate it actually is going to be. But I think that implies that there's a lot for us to get excited about. And one thing to keep in mind is that they have a gladiator arena. Because, of course, how else can you have the Star Gladiator unless you have a gladiator arena? So we can see over here, she's very, like, impassioned, has a very, you know, fierce desire for battle. And, you know, if I could compare her to an existing character, just from, like, her design and everything that's going on over here, I would say she actually reminds me a lot of Camellia. Probably not as crazy or as, you know, mentally deranged or, you know, as much baggage as Camellia herself. But, you know, that probably is the most, like, battle-fueled character we've had on the roster yet. But, you know, probably won't be going down that sort of vibe too much. Those familiar with some other games under the Kuro umbrella have been drawing a lot of comparisons to her design with Vera, who is like a punishing gray raven character that has, been in the game for an extremely long time, has a bunch of different forms. And a lot of people are saying, like, this is a, it's an XP of her. And I think it's fair to say I can see where they're coming from, because the weapon is, it's the same photo, right? The weapon is essentially the same exact photo. They both got like the long sort of like spear, halberd, blade thing going on. This Vera is one that just came out on CN, is coming to global soon. So, hopefully you can see some sort of relation over there. They might have similar kits. Oh, and Vera also uses fire. She also uses a lot of fire. So with that, we have an idea of the weapon that she's using. We have pretty much a confirmation of her attribute, which is going to be fusion. I mean, if this isn't fusion, then I don't really know what the devs are doing anymore with the design of the game. They're probably getting way too confusing with it. Now that we've talked a little bit about her design, we talked a little bit about what attribute role she's going to be playing, let's talk about fusion as a whole. And boy, oh boy, there has been a gap missing in the fusion roster for a very long time. I'm gonna have to talk about a character that you all know I have a very interesting relationship with. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Chang Li. Because, let's be honest here, there has been something missing with Chang Li and her design for a very long time, ever since she released almost a year ago in version 1.1. And that is whatever the fuck this is supposed to be. This outro skill that for, I mean, it's been at least 7 or 8 versions of the game. She was released in version 1.1, and up until now, Chang Li has not had a proper recipient of this outro skill. Nobody's been able to use it properly. There is no fusion character on the roster that deals like a meaningful, enough meaningful resonance liberation damage for her to actually properly buff and gain as much utility or as much like buffing potential possible out of this outro skill. You have Encore, who's basic attack. You have Chisha, who does like a mix of damage. You have Brant, that's also basic attack. You have Mortifeet, who kind of isn't really supposed to use this because he swaps off field for coordinated attacks and then loses the buff. And so really, it genuinely feels like if Lupa isn't the one that's fusion damage and resonance liberation damage, who fucking knows when Chang Li's actually gonna find somebody that actually uses this buff properly. And one thing we also know, ladies and gentlemen, is that Chang Li's swimsuit bikini skin is also gonna be releasing in 2.4. And so all signs are kind of pointing to a Chang Li rerun. And when we've seen how other characters have rerun in the past, upon Carlotta's initial release, right? We had Jeja released with her. Coincidentally, Carlotta's a resonance skill damage dealer, right? And then you had Jeja come in, who is a resonance skill and glacial buffer. And so yeah, a lot of people are imagining that Chang Li is going to be the premier buffer for Lupa, because, let's be honest here, guys, he hasn't had one yet. He has not had a proper teammate to use this outro skill. And I think after almost a year of release, it's finally time for something like that to happen. That's going to be my initial take on the role. Who knows? Maybe the best in slot team is going to be like a combo of like Brant, who goes ahead and then, with his fusion and resonance skill damage buffs Chang Li, who does resonance skill damage, and then Chang Li goes ahead and then buffs Lupa, and then who the fuck knows what Lupa is going to do. Maybe she just ends the rotation over there, and then you just start off with like Brant again. That would kind of be like a triple DPS lineup that we haven't really seen fully yet in this game, but we have seen clues of triple DPS lineups in other attributes, such as with Cantarella, where she has a Havoc and Resonance skill damage amplification that currently nobody in this game actually uses. And then Cantarella, right, mainly does basic attack damage over here, as you can see from her perception drain. And then Rosia is considered a decent buffer for her as well. So there might be a triple DPS team coming up for Havoc, where you have like Rosia, you have Cantarella, and then you have like a third DPS coming in that probably does Havoc Resonance skill damage. So that's what some of the archetypes that we see coming up. Who knows, maybe Lupa's gonna have like something that buffs Brant, but it's pretty clear over here with Brant providing healing and shielding. Brant providing healing and shielding from his anchor, buffing Chang Li, and then Chang Li buffing Lupa. I do think that's going to be a pretty interesting team. If, it's a big if, Lupa does resonance liberation damage. But if she doesn't, and she's something completely different, if she's not actually fusion, and I guess if she doesn't deal resonance liberation damage, I guess Chang Li might as well just go fuck herself for another patch. maybe her teammate's going to come out in 2026. I personally think she's waited long enough. And that's why I and many other people are thinking that this is going to be our fusion liberation damage dealer. So with that, we talked a little bit about her role. We've also gotten, I pre-watched this one a little bit. We also got some clues about her weapon. Let's go ahead and give this one a listen. Okay. That's some pretty hype music, I'm not gonna lie. That's some pretty solid stuff. Let's see what the close-ups were like over here. Okay, we start off with the fire. Usually, Kuro gives us a pretty solid clue on the attribute that the character is gonna be, starting off with, like, the very first flame, and this is just a close-up of, like, literal fire. So. Then we got, like, the flag, spear sort of thing going on over here. You think she's Spectra? Okay. Even more fire. More fire over here. Close-up of, well, we all know who they're appealing to with this one. We all know who they're appealing to with this one over here. And then we got her looking feisty as hell in the close-up. Her outfit is pretty interesting. It looks like a skin-tight bodysuit. Kind of goes like all the way. It's got like a couple of gaps in the clothing. You can see her tasset mark over here, actually. It's kind of like on the side of her hip and the ribs. I'm not gonna lie, if you wanted to get like this tattoo in real life, this would be pretty goddamn painful. So yeah, you can clearly see her tasset mark over here. They're not really trying to hide it very much at all. So, you know, as we all know with every single liberation animation, you end up getting like a close-up of it somewhere. But yeah, just ignore the attention, warrior. The victory is ours to savor. So, really, really nice cinematic over there, doing some of the drip. Now let's read what they actually got in here. Flame erupts from within her body. As she channels the full force of fire. Is it clear now, ladies and gentlemen? Is it clear yet? Into the broad blade. So, I don't know if this is a mistranslation issue. I don't know if this is something that they sort of, like, messed up when they were writing this. Maybe this is supposed to say spear. But if we're supposed to take this at face value, she is more like Jian than we might have actually thought. Because Jian is also a broad blade user that ends up using a spear. And it looks like she's also going to be a broad blade user that ends up using a spear. Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily an issue. And we also don't have... Just as a note, we don't really have a limited broad blade user that does liberation damage. And if that's what her weapon ends up buffing, then Calcharo might actually become a way more viable unit. Because he'll have a 5-star weapon that if she does liberation damage, because of everything we talked about before, he might have a weapon that actually works for him and actually buffs his main damage type. So, yeah, again, we already have Resonance Skill, we already have Heavy Attack. I guess we don't have a basic attack focused Fusion Broadblade, but if Lupa is also basic attack damage, I think that these devs are absolutely cooked. Because we already have Brant, and we already have Encore. We literally already have 2 Fusion basic attack damage focused characters, and we don't have a Liberation one yet. And so that's just kind of like more of a clue to me that she's not going to be basic and she is going to be Liberation. With a pleasant smile, she dives into the heat of battle, her wolf-like instincts guiding her to track down enemies and strike down villains. Yeah, that's what Lupa means. It actually means wolf in Spanish. So perfectly in theme. And we can see over here, she's probably going to summon some wolves, some fiery wolves to go attack her enemies across her animation. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think that there's a lot to be excited about. I think that there's more to be excited about if you already own some of the Fusion characters. And so I would say, but again, take my words with a grain of salt because obviously nothing is confirmed. I think that people have been complaining actively. I've seen people complaining actively on YouTube about how there's like no leaks at all about version 2.4. So again, this is just like entirely speculation what we're talking about. I would say if you're super excited for her, this is just my take. If you're super excited for her and you really want to get her, then maybe it's worth thinking about potentially exploring getting, you know, a Chang Li or getting a Brant if you already have a Chang Li, because Brant is basically Chang Li's best partner on that second round of the anniversary banners. If you do have some extra savings, you're not that interested in like Spectral Frazzle, you're not that interested in Arrow Erosion or Cartithia, just to like maybe round out this team and maybe see where it goes, because Brant always is going to work with Chang Li. And the assumption is that Chang-Li is going to work with Lupa. So again, don't take my words as like full truth, but that's what I think is going to be a good combination in the future. And if you don't have either, we know for sure that Chang-Li is going to be rerunning, or I don't think we know for sure, but I would hope that Chang-Li is rerunning in version 2.4, because why the fuck else would they be releasing her skin during that patch if she wasn't going to be available? That's really good. That's probably one of the worst ways they could ever market the character. One last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to Lupa is that if she's not liberation damage focused, she might actually be debuff focused due to all the work that we've been seeing for elements or for attributes like Spectral Frazzle and Arrow Erosion. It could turn out that Fusion Burst, which essentially has like a stackable debuff that when it reaches a certain level, I do believe it's about 10, it'll ignite and deal a burst of damage to the enemy. And so Lupa could also be a character that begins this archetype, and then that archetype is going to be getting some support. However, I still think that Kuro has almost like a responsibility at this point to complete and give Chang-Li an ideal partner. And so that's why I'm not too confident about this, because I do think a lot of existing maybe Chang-Li owners would be very upset that they're going ahead and they're starting out a new archetype when they are, you know, kind of leaving like their work unfinished with some of the existing members on the roster. But we'll just have to see when it comes to our kit reveal what they actually end up doing, because as we all know, everything is subject to change, and, you know, maybe they'll decide to go down the debuff route instead. It would be unfortunate, but it is something that we have to keep in mind. So with that, that's going to be my overview. That's going to be our little chat about Lupa. I think that she has an amazing design, and I hope she fills in a role on the roster that we just haven't had a lot to do with. Let me know what you all think. Peace.